So what that means is my parents are both Cambodian refugees, and in the 1970s there was a civil war, and that led to a genocide that my parents both somehow met each other and survived and escaped from that. So a lot of my poetry, since I started writing in high school, has always been about being Cambodian. And I remember being in high school and not really knowing much about my cultural identity. And that's because my mom was a single mom, and she just has so much PTSD to this day of her trauma with the war. So my job was just like, I was always like researching, doing my own research. I did ask her one time when I wanted to write like my very first stamp poem, like, so what happened to our family during the war? And she cried, telling me that story. And I remember vowing to myself that, all right, I feel like I never want to have her just like unwrap these layers of her onion, right? So a lot of the poems that I write are like referencing research that I've done, as well as taking parts of stories that my mom has told me and just lived experiences of being the daughter of refugee. So I'll share like 3 or 4, but not too. This first one is called Dance, Dance, Dance. This is actually an anthology of Cambodian poetry, prose, and performance, and this was published by the University of Hawaii. So I'll share this like during the writing workshop, but it's a lot of different authors that share their own work in here, so I thought that would be cool to share. But this one's called Dance, Dance, Dance. My parents met in the dark while escaping the genocide. They relied on the reflection of the pale moon against their skin for guidance. Dad said that Mom was glowing like an angel. In the Cambodian culture, an Apsara is a goddess of earth and water. They are heavenly dancers. I've learned about them to know what it means to be Cambodian. I've read somewhere that Apsaras are often the wives of musicians. I do not know if this is true, but it makes a lot of sense to me. Back in the day, Dad used to be quite the charmer. Before the PTSD kicked in, he was a ghostwriter for the Cambodian music label, The Golden Butterfly. If you listen closely to all the albums, you'll know exactly which songs are about Mom. She learned how to dance in a refugee camp in Thailand. She's never stopped practicing. It's been 20 years now that Dad's been gone, but you can still hear his voice ringing in the hallway, a scratched vinyl on a broken record player, all your favorite cassette tapes stretched apart and thrown into the wood stove. I catch Mom dancing in the kitchen. She says, "The acoustics here are the best." Dad is a distant choke gargling in the sink. I watch her move for him, her wings draped in gold and heavy with the curse. We are both in constant battles with our bodies. Mom tells me to stop dancing in fear that I will become my mother's daughter, a lover of men who leave after teaching us how to move for her. She says, "Marry someone with the music not stitched into their skin, or you'll just end up like me, a sad snake returning home to its charmer." Thank you. So I call that Dance, Dance, Dance because a form of storytelling in Cambodian culture is our royal ballet. And that happened way before like the genocide happened, and it just like Apsaras are depicted through dance, so there's very elaborate costumes, jewelry, and the way that the dancers move, their movement is depicted through their hand movements. So I always reference like hands, touch, and just dancing angels. So that's imagery that you might see. Okay, so this next one, this is from my first book of poetry. It's called The Genocide's Love Baby Learns to Sing. I haven't read this poem in a really long time. It's called 1965, and I'll just get into it. In 1965, America, the Righteous Brothers released their hit version of the song Unchained Melody. In 1965, Cambodia, a 2-year-old baby watches Sin Sisamut, the Elvis of our kingdom, for the first time as he opens up for the Cambodian Royal Ballet. In 1969, America, Elvis Presley appears at American Sound for his first session in hopes that he will record yet another chart topper. He does this with the release of Suspicious Minds. In 1969, Cambodia, President Nixon's top secret Operation Menu is activated and a breakfast of bombs fall from our skies. I picture President Nixon sitting in his Republican bed with a tray of breakfast and roses while he sips his Prosecco and says, "We should let them have it again. Crack the hell out of them." And on the same day, we get served lunch, snack, dinner, supper, and dessert. In 1969 America, Elvis is somewhere on some stage singing "We're Caught in a Trap." I can't walk out because I love you too much, baby. And in 1969 Cambodia, a civil war erupts. In 1970, somewhere in a burning jungle, the most radical, brutal communist regime forms under the lead of Pol Pot. In 1970 America, Diana Ross is singing her farewell on a stage with the Supremes. In 1970 Cambodia, Ross Saray Sophia sings "Take the Meat, Leave the Bone," perhaps a foreshadow of what's to come. In 1975 Cambodia, that 2-year-old baby is now 12 and has just watched the Khmer Rouge murder her father. Ross Saray Sophia's eerie, beautiful voice is not around to sing his eulogy. She is not around to sing hers either. Meanwhile, in 1975 America, Mick Jagger makes headlines for receiving 17 stitches after punching a restaurant window. The shattering of glass is so loud that my teenage father mistakes it for the destruction of his country. He does not know that it is the sound of broken dreams and the creation of PTSD. In 1979 Cambodia, my parents are fleeing the war hand in hand and falling in love under a full moon. Perhaps I was on my grandfather's lap, rooting for the survivors who birthed me. In 1979 America, my parents wake up in Chicago to the sound of Michael Jackson's "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough." My father gets a perm and a glove to be more American, just like the other boys. My mother, she wants to start a family. Thank you.
That's good!
Thank you, baby. You're so sweet. I have my family in the back. It makes me even more nervous. But this is, it's kind of late on a school night, so this is the bedtime story. Do I have time for one more?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do one more. This one's called Family Album. It's a little spooky, which is just spinning because it's spooky season. Spooky. You want to say here?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanna be my next teacher.
Okay, be right
Since
next.
I'm the child.
Since you're the child. Do you want to say hi to everyone?
Hi.
Do you want to share what your cultural identity is?
And also one fact, I'm Cambodian and Vietnamese.
Yeah.
Also, let me look at the title. That's your book?
It is my book. Okay, what are you going to say?
Hey, Esther, do you remember what you came here and sang?
Yes, I remember.
When you were
Are you
really
going to sing
little?
a song?
You came and sang. Maybe I have to sing at the end.
On the
of
microphone,
On the
too.
microphone. Could you let me have her, please?
And I forgot that song.
This is a lesson. So Eli's a boy, just super rock star hair.
And you can confuse this boy as a girl. Cause when checklist, he has long hair.
Yeah, he's a rock star. All right, you're gonna stand right next to me?
Yeah.
Are you sure? It's a little scary. Sit down. Okay, so is everyone good?
Yeah.
How y'all doing? Good?
Yeah, we're all good.
All right, so this one's called Family Album. Mom doesn't like to take pictures. The only photo we have together is of us on our front steps. Me in my prom gown, her with the biggest I've ever seen her smile. Her porcelain is something I was born into, fragile, small, easily broken. We repainted the whole entire first floor last week. Mom took the family photos off the living room walls. We stare at the new blank slate. I want to teach her how to love herself again. Dad is in 3 photos. He is holding me in all of them. He is helping me pick apples today. He whispers, "Let the fruit fall from the tree. If it spoils before you can bite into it, let it plant life right in front of you." I've been trying to grow myself a father ever since. Dad has bad teeth. I'm convinced he has a mouthful of bruised apple and blistering ego. My parents met during the genocide. Dad inherited a jewelry store in his dirt-rich village. Mom was a pretty city girl. It was the glory years, the ultimate love story. Find a lover your age or fast enough to plant life before they can catch you. But they never taught me how to love. They've only taught me how to mess around like I will run out of life. Mom collects porcelain figurines and fancy china sets. She calls this her hobby. She leaves them all in display cases in the dining room.
What?
We haven't shared a meal together in years. On the nights when the house spirit doesn't scare me bad enough, I kneel down and carve my fingernails into the flesh of the living room walls. My therapist says that family photos are my instant triggers. When I date someone who comes from a big family, I want to turn them all into ghosts. All the boys I love come from big families. They invite me over for dinner. I try my best not to turn my knife into a battle cry. I sit still and smile. Carve my fork along the blues in my arms, trying to trace back to where my parents met and disassembled their paths before they even crossed.
Whoa, I noticed some blue right here.
Okay, baby, go sit down. Mom still hasn't put the family photos back onto the living room walls. I say, let's fill the frames with baby birds that jump to their death in the song cry of an abandoned bee. I hear the house spirits screaming at me through the walls. I keep it trapped inside a home that will never learn how to sing its name. She frowns at me, cries at the sight of me performing my own autopsy, stretches her arms across the walls. I ask, isn't this how a family photo works? We plant each other onto the walls so that strangers can envy us, right? She whispers, honeybee, where'd you get those teeth? You look so much like your father with that smile. Thank you.
That was awesome.
Thank you,
What we'd
baby.
like to do
I don't know
is,
what
to
is
bring it up a little
good.
bit, is take a moment, and if you like, you can sit, Princess, but what I'd like to do is open up for students if they, to have an opportunity to ask you some questions, or just to make maybe some comments about, as they're processing your poetry. So,
I sometimes call him a crybaby.
you do. That
what
could be the
do I
title
say?
of a poem.
I know. my next
Could
novel.
just write all the sentences the kids would say. And then
I almost
I'll be right here, so
Okay.
if you have questions,
all right, but anyway, so if we could have, what we would like to do is, just so that it's not like, just to break it up before we bring Marina up, is what kind of questions that come to your mind as you listen to those poems, and, you know, what maybe surprised you, or, you know, just what's something maybe you have a question about in relationship to the Cambodian experience or immigration to immigrating to the United States, and that. So let's have a couple questions from people. I'll give you a moment to think about it. All right, so what kind of questions can we think of? We have one here. So Princess, could you just come back up for a moment?
Was writing poetry like your mom's experience also maybe therapeutic for you?
So that's a really good question because my mom, she didn't really like understand what poetry was. And I was in high school and I didn't really like, I never learned the word for poem or like writing. So she was just like, what are you always doing after school? Like, what are these competitions? And then I think it was like Louder Than a Bomb when it was called that. And my team was on final stage and I performed a poem about like my identity, and that was like my first poem that was actually inspired by her stories that she told me. So the first time and only time I asked her about her experience, she's cried so hard because she told me the story about how she was in a concentration camp and she was forced to pick apples and like harvest apples, but of course they were starving and she was a child, and there was an apple that fell and was bruised. And I actually used that same imagery in Family Album about my dad in that comparison. But basically she got caught taking a bite of the spoiled apple, and the soldier dragged her by her ear like to humiliate her and use her as an example. And then once she told me that story, I was just like, okay, like I've heard enough. But I used that same imagery in my first poem about her. And since it was Louder Than a Bomb and it was filmed and it was on a stage, and she saw like the magnitude of like what I do and how storytelling just affects everyone and brings everyone in, and is so important and tells her story too. And I finally like figured out the term for like writing poetry, which is to save the map. And then she understood like, oh, so like you're a writer. And she told me like when she was little, she loved writing, she loved drawing, she loved making her own stories. So yeah, so that's like my story of how I can connect to my mother with that, and she became more accepting of it. But then I did see like as I grew older and like learned how to unpack my own trauma of like being the daughter of refugees, and like how that experience itself is just another ballpark, and learning how to honor my parents and their legacy and their story while honoring my story. And like sometimes it feels like I'm airing like dirty laundry, but it still is like my story to tell as well. So my mom doesn't like read like all of my poems, right? But she's seen a few and knows that like her story has informed a lot of my stories. So, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Do we have another question? All right, I'm just going to move the